They call it by many street names: snow, flake, powder, blow. Yet all these nicknames point to the same notorious substance, one with a lineage so old that chemical traces have been discovered in mummified remains dating back thousands of years. What began as a natural gift from a highland plant now fuels an illicit industry worth billions, claiming lives in every corner of the world through overdoses and long-term health damage. We are speaking of cocaine, one of the most sought-after illegal stimulants on Earth. It holds a glamorous, dangerous mystique, but beneath the allure lies a hard truth that is often distorted by rumor, misinformation, and selective storytelling. To truly grasp its reach, one must start with its essence. At the heart of this drug lies a compound classified as a tropane alkaloid, occurring naturally within the leaves of a shrub that grows across the mountainous terrain of South America. The plant is coca, a botanical source revered for generations by the people native to these regions. The alkaloid within those leaves can be extracted, purified, and transformed into a fine white crystalline substance more formally known as cocaine hydrochloride. In this processed state, it becomes far more potent than the raw leaf, capable of triggering swift and profound effects on the human nervous system. Cocaine belongs to a broader family of central nervous system stimulants, a group that also encompasses substances ranging from caffeine in your morning coffee to nicotine in tobacco, as well as prescription medications designed to treat attention disorders or certain sleep-related conditions. All stimulants share a core function. They heighten alertness, boost energy, and accelerate the brain's activity. Cocaine, however, operates with an intensity that can override the body's natural chemical balance, locking directly into the circuits of the brain that govern reward and pleasure. This is the brain's reinforcement center, the same system that responds when you savor a meal you love, complete a challenging goal, hear a favorite song, or enjoy moments of connection with others. These natural events spark the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter that signals satisfaction and motivates repetition of pleasurable actions. Cocaine disrupts this finely tuned cycle by flooding the system, preventing dopamine from being reabsorbed and thereby amplifying its signal beyond normal bounds. The result is a sudden rush of euphoria, heightened confidence, and a perception of boundless energy. For some users, the experience extends into extremes, feelings of invincibility, exaggerated self-assurance, and at times paranoia or distorted thinking that can slip into outright delusion. Aggression may rise, coordination may falter, and the body itself reacts with measurable shifts. Blood pressure climbs, body temperature increases, and pupils widen, making the eyes highly sensitive to light. Yet the peak of this stimulation is brief, often no more than 15 to 30 minutes before the sensation begins to fade. Even when the subjective high has passed, the chemical traces linger. In the hours and days following consumption, the substance can be detected in the bloodstream, saliva, and urine, with hair follicles preserving evidence for months. This enduring chemical footprint serves as a reminder that cocaine's presence in the body far outlasts its fleeting burst of pleasure. To understand how this compound moved from the leaves of a remote plant to the center of a global narcotics market, one must rewind the timeline thousands of years. In the high valleys and rugged slopes of the Andes, long before modern borders or colonial conquests, local communities discovered the coca leaf's stimulating qualities. Archaeological findings reveal that these people, ancestors of cultures like the Wari and Inca, were chewing the leaves, brewing them into infusions and incorporating them into remedies for altitude sickness, pain, and fatigue over a millennium ago. The practice was not recreational in the modern sense, but woven into survival, ceremony, and daily labor. Chewing the leaves released a mild stimulant effect, helping laborers endure long hours at high elevation and offering warmth in frigid conditions. When combined with alkaline substances, the active compounds were absorbed more efficiently, easing symptoms of hunger and cold while providing a sense of well-being. In a medicinal context, the leaves were used to soothe oral discomfort, treat minor wounds, and maintain stamina during demanding treks across mountainous terrain. This localized tradition persisted until the 16th century, when European invaders arrived in force. Observing the indigenous population's use of coca, the conquerors quickly recognized its value and potential for exploitation. Following the violent collapse of the Inca Empire, the colonial authorities imposed large-scale coca cultivation, forcing native laborers to produce leaves not just for local use, but for export to Europe. The plant's journey beyond its homeland had begun. For centuries, coca remained primarily a regional commodity, but the 19th century brought a scientific breakthrough that would change its course forever. Chemists isolated cocaine itself from the plant, separating the active alkaloid from the fibrous leaf. This refined substance could be transported easily, stored without spoiling, and delivered in precise doses. The timing coincided with an era when Western medicine was still unrestrained by the modern system of drug regulation, and enthusiasm for exotic plant-derived compounds was at its peak. Physicians and entrepreneurs promoted cocaine as a tonic for exhaustion, a mood enhancer, and even an aphrodisiac. It appeared in over-the-counter remedies for persistent aches, emotional malaise, and diminished vitality. In the late 19th century, it was infused into wines and tonics, sold in pharmacies and general stores. It was incorporated into the formulas of beverages that would later evolve into global brands. At that time marketed as patent medicines, promising restorative powers and energy. By the early 20th century, growing awareness of the drug's risks, coupled with new legal frameworks, began to curb its use in consumer products. Regulatory bodies demanded accurate labeling, and many of the so-called cure-alls disappeared or were reformulated without cocaine. Nonetheless, the drug retained a role in certain specialized medical procedures. Because of its ability to numb tissue and constrict blood vessels, cocaine remains a viable, though rarely chosen, anesthetic in delicate surgeries involving the nose, eyes, and throat. In such settings, its controlled application minimizes bleeding and provides localized pain relief. Recreational use of cocaine underwent a resurgence decades later, gaining traction in the nightlife of the 1970s and 1980s. Its image was fueled by media portrayals, celebrity anecdotes, and an association with wealth and exclusivity. In powder form, it could be inhaled through the nose, rubbed onto the gums, dissolved for injection, or, in a chemically altered version, smoked. When snorted, the particles are absorbed through mucous membranes, crossing into the bloodstream rapidly and reaching the brain within minutes. The same is true when applied to the gums, where thin oral tissues permit quick entry into circulation. In both cases, the high arrives swiftly, a feature that enhances the drug's addictive potential. Ingesting cocaine through the stomach produces weaker, slower effects, as the digestive process alters the chemical before it reaches the brain in significant amounts. The speed of onset is part of the reason dependence can develop so quickly. The intense surge fades in less than half an hour, prompting users to seek repeated doses to sustain the feeling. With each repetition, however, the brain's receptors adapt, dulling the impact and requiring ever larger quantities to achieve the same rush. This escalating cycle strains the cardiovascular system, increases the likelihood of stroke or heart attack, and heightens psychological instability. The dangers are not confined to heavy users. Even infrequent experimentation can cause harm. Snorting the powder repeatedly can irritate nasal tissues, leading to chronic congestion, frequent nosebleeds, and over time, loss of the ability to smell. The constriction of blood vessels in the nose, combined with elevated blood pressure, makes those vessels prone to rupture. In severe or prolonged use, tissue decay can set in part due to the buildup of acidic byproducts within the nasal cavity. Applying cocaine to the gums carries risks as well, including infection and erosion of tooth enamel. Dehydration, common with stimulant use, reduces saliva flow, leaving teeth vulnerable to decay. Clenching and grinding, often an involuntary response to the drug, accelerates dental damage. Injection, the most direct method, delivers an immediate and powerful high, but also exposes the user to infections, vascular injury, and a dramatically increased risk of overdose. These dangers are compounded when cocaine is mixed with other substances. A combination with heroin, known colloquially as a speedball, has claimed numerous lives. The sedative effects of the opioid can mask the signs of stimulant overdose until it is too late. Pairing cocaine with alcohol produces a third chemical within the body, one that intensifies euphoria but magnifies stress on the heart. Social settings where cocaine is shared often involve communal tools, straws, rolled paper, or syringes, raising the possibility of transmitting blood-borne diseases. This is the point where the conversation inevitably turns toward another form of the drug, one created through a chemical transformation that allows it to be smoked. But that, along with the cultural, chemical, and historical forces that shaped its rise, belongs to the next section of this script. In the shifting world of illicit substances, cocaine eventually took on a second identity, a derivative that could be inhaled as vapor rather than powder, one that would become an icon of both street-level dealing and political controversy. This altered version, known on the street as crack, is essentially cocaine transformed into its free base form. The original powdered compound, cocaine hydrochloride, is unsuitable for smoking because it decomposes at high temperatures before vaporizing effectively. But by chemically freeing it from its hydrochloride attachment, the melting point drops to a range that allows the drug to be inhaled as smoke, delivering an explosive rush directly through the lungs into the bloodstream. The process to create it is deceptively simple. Powdered cocaine is mixed with water, then combined with a base substance, commonly baking soda, and heated until the chemical bond shifts. As the mixture cools, it hardens into brittle chunks, often called rocks, which can be broken into smaller pieces. These are placed into a glass pipe, heated from below, and inhaled before the vapor dissipates. Unlike powdered cocaine, which can be stored in larger quantities and used gradually, crack is typically packaged in tiny doses, ready for immediate sale and consumption. The delivery method alters the experience dramatically. Smoking sends the drug into the bloodstream almost instantaneously, and the effect on the brain is both swift and overwhelming. The high peaks within seconds, accompanied by an intense wave of euphoria and physical stimulation. Yet, like the powdered form, the sensation fades quickly, often in under 10 minutes. leaving the user with an abrupt crash and an urgent desire to repeat the experience. This rapid cycle feeds a compulsive pattern of repeated hits, each one chasing the brief thrill of the last. Because of this immediacy and intensity, crack gained a reputation for being more addictive than its powdered counterpart, though in truth, both forms share the same active chemical. The difference lies in the method of delivery, which changes how quickly and how hard the brain is hit with dopamine. The faster the rise, the sharper the fall, and the more powerful the craving to restore the peak. The physical toll of crack is severe. The hot glass pipes used for smoking can cause burns on the lips and fingertips, a telltale sign among frequent users. Inhalation of the hot vapor irritates and inflames the lungs, sometimes leading to chronic respiratory issues and coughing up blood. Because the vapor loses potency rapidly after leaving the pipe, pipes are made intentionally short. But this also concentrates the heat and the harshness of the smoke. Over time, repeated exposure can cause lasting lung damage, from scar tissue buildup to reduced capacity. The emergence of crack in the 1980s intersected with a complex web of social and political forces. In low-income urban neighborhoods across the United States, it was cheaper to buy than powdered cocaine, making it accessible to a wider population. Its affordability came with hidden dangers. Lower cost often meant lower purity, as dealers stretched their product by mixing in other substances, some harmless fillers, others toxic. At street level, baking soda and sugars were common, but more hazardous agents, including chemical irritants and pharmaceutical powders, were also used. At the height of its spread, public discourse in the United States erupted into what became known as the crack epidemic. Graphic public service announcements, urgent legislative action, and sensationalized media stories painted crack as a unique menace. Television spots featured unlikely spokespeople, from actors to children's TV characters, urging viewers to reject the drug. The public conversation quickly expanded beyond health risks, folding in fear about crime rates, moral decline, and the future of communities most affected. One particularly charged element of that era was the fear surrounding infants born to mothers who used crack during pregnancy. The term crack baby entered the cultural vocabulary, often accompanied by predictions that a generation of children would face insurmountable developmental and behavioral challenges. Later research would show that these claims were greatly exaggerated, and that the long-term effects of prenatal cocaine exposure were less severe than initially portrayed, and in many cases, no more damaging than the effects of alcohol or nicotine during pregnancy. Still, the stigma created by this panic lingered for decades, shaping public attitudes toward both the drug and those who used it. The cutting agents in crack, and in powdered cocaine as well, remain a significant hazard. At times, the additives are relatively inert, chosen only to increase volume for profit. But other times, they introduce entirely new health threats. One such adulterant is levamisole, a veterinary antiparasitic drug that can cause dangerous suppression of the immune system and trigger autoimmune responses. Another, more recent threat is fentanyl, a synthetic opioid so potent that even trace contamination can be fatal. While some assume dealers intentionally mix fentanyl into cocaine to increase its addictive potential, chemical analyses of seized drugs suggest that most contamination occurs accidentally. In shared processing spaces or storage areas where both drugs are handled. Yet, intentional or not, the combination is deadly, especially because its effects can mask or alter the signs of overdose, delaying intervention. A blend of cocaine and heroin, the so-called speedball, is one of the most infamous and dangerous drug combinations in circulation. Here, the stimulant effect of cocaine collides with the depressant effect of heroin, creating a false sense of balance. Users may feel both hyper-alert and relaxed, but the competing effects strain the heart and respiratory system in unpredictable ways. A body under such dueling chemical instructions can suddenly tip into cardiac arrest or respiratory failure. Tragically, this combination has claimed the lives of numerous well-known figures, as well as countless others far from the public eye. Another risky pairing is cocaine with alcohol. Inside the liver, these two substances react to form cocaethylene, a third compound with a longer half-life than cocaine itself. While cocaethylene can enhance feelings of pleasure and confidence, it also exerts additional stress on the heart and significantly increases the risk of sudden death. Because the stimulant masks some of the sedating effects of alcohol, people may drink more than they realize, compounding the danger. From a physiological standpoint, the damage cocaine inflicts depends not only on the dose and frequency of use, but also on the route of administration. Each method carries its own profile of risks. Inhalation can erode nasal passages and sinuses. Oral application can degrade teeth and gums. Smoking can scar the lungs. Injection can lead to collapsed veins, infections, and bloodborne diseases. In all cases, the strain on the cardiovascular system is profound, and the psychological repercussions, paranoia, anxiety, and compulsive behavior can persist long after physical traces of the drug have left the body. The cultural image of cocaine in the 1980s and 1990s oscillated between glamour and ruin. In certain circles, it was seen as a symbol of status, a mark of access to the fast lane of wealth, nightlife, and influence. In others, especially where crack dominated, it became a shorthand for urban decay and social collapse. This dual image reflected more than personal choice. It mirrored the socio-economic divide in how the drug was marketed, distributed, and punished in the justice system. The disparity in sentencing laws between crack and powder offenses in the United States became one of the most widely criticized elements of drug policy, with penalties for crack possession and sale vastly exceeding those for powder, despite their chemical equivalents. Even outside the courtroom, the ripple effects were immense. Communities heavily affected by crack use saw spikes in health emergencies, family disruption, and neighborhood instability. Public health campaigns attempted to address the spread, but these often collided with law enforcement strategies focused on punitive measures rather than treatment. Over time, the understanding of addiction as a medical condition rather than solely a criminal behavior began to shift the conversation. But progress was uneven. From a purely chemical perspective, the body's interaction with cocaine, in any form, is a story of imbalance. The brain, accustomed to regulating its own dopamine cycles, becomes overstimulated, its reward pathways hijacked. Over time, this overactivation can blunt natural pleasure responses, leaving the user dependent on the drug to feel joy or even normal energy. This is part of why withdrawal, while often lacking the severe physical symptoms of substances like alcohol or opioids, can still be deeply challenging. The absence of cocaine leaves a psychological void, a drop into fatigue, restlessness, irritability, and depression. The next phase of this exploration moves beyond the immediate chemical rush and societal context into the quieter, more grueling reality of quitting. Withdrawal, relapse risk, and the long path to recovery are where the story turns from chemical mechanics to to human endurance. And while some manage to leave cocaine behind for good, others find themselves caught in a cycle that can last years, if not a lifetime. When the last echo of the high fades and the body settles into a hollow stillness, the reality of life without the drug begins. For many who have used cocaine, whether in powder or crack form, stopping is less a single act than a prolonged battle fought on multiple fronts. The physical substance leaves the bloodstream relatively quickly, but its effects on the brain, the mind, and the emotions can persist long after. Unlike some drugs that cause violent, physically dangerous withdrawals, cocaine's departure from the body rarely triggers seizures or life-threatening complications on its own. But that does not mean the process is gentle. What makes this particular withdrawal so punishing is the deep psychological slump that follows. A crash that can leave a person feeling as if the color has drained from their entire existence. In the first hours after use, fatigue rolls in like a heavy tide. The same neural pathways that have been firing with amplified dopamine now feel eerily quiet, leaving behind exhaustion, irritability, and a flatness of mood. This is often accompanied by an overwhelming urge to take more, not out of curiosity or celebration, but simply to escape the bleak sensation that nothing will feel good again without it. The contrast between the euphoric rush and this muted state can be so stark that even individuals who are not daily users find themselves blindsided by the intensity of the craving. Over the next day or two, other symptoms emerge. Sleep becomes erratic. Some find themselves sleeping for unusually long stretches, while others lie awake despite bone-deep tiredness. Appetite often rebounds sharply as the stimulant effect that suppressed hunger dissipates. Reflexes slow, concentration dulls, and decision-making feels clouded. For someone accustomed to the heightened alertness cocaine provides, this sluggishness can be disorienting, even frightening. The emotional component is perhaps the most dangerous aspect of this stage. Depression can sink in with surprising force, sometimes accompanied by anxiety, restlessness, or a vague but persistent sense of dread. It is not uncommon for people in withdrawal to experience intrusive thoughts about using again, framed in the language of relief rather than risk. Just one more time to feel normal again. The brain, conditioned by repeated dopamine surges, interprets the absence of stimulation as a problem that needs solving, and it pushes relentlessly for the quickest solution. In the weeks that follow, the outward signs of withdrawal may fade, but the inner work is far from over. Cocaine disrupts the brain's natural reward system, and repairing that balance is a slow process. Without sustained abstinence, the neural circuits never truly reset, meaning even a small exposure to the drug can reignite cravings with almost full force. This vulnerability to relapse is what makes recovery so precarious. Therapy plays a crucial role in navigating this phase. While there is no pharmaceutical equivalent to methadone for opioid addiction, no pill that can block the effect of cocaine or replace it with a safer substitute, there are behavioral approaches that have proven effective. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, for example, helps individuals identify the thought patterns and environmental triggers that lead to use. Then develop alternative strategies for handling stress, boredom, or temptation. Group support is another pillar of recovery. In shared settings, people can speak openly about their struggles without fear of judgment, drawing on the experiences of others who have walked the same path. Hearing how someone else survived a moment of overwhelming craving, or how they rebuilt parts of their life damaged by addiction, can offer both perspective and hope. This communal element is also a safeguard against isolation, which can be a fertile ground for relapse. Family involvement can be both a help and a hurdle. Loved ones often bear the emotional scars of the addiction. Trust may have been broken, relationships strained, finances drained. Rebuilding those bonds requires patience on both sides. Structured family therapy can open lines of communication that may have been closed for years, allowing everyone involved to understand the cycle of addiction and the role they can play in supporting change without enabling destructive behavior. Relapse itself, while feared, is not uncommon. In fact, for many, it is part of the broader journey out of dependence. The key distinction lies in whether relapse becomes a stopping point or a turning point. Each return to the drug offers an opportunity to analyze what went wrong, what warning signs were missed, what situations or emotions tipped the balance, and to adjust the recovery plan accordingly. In this sense, the process is iterative, shaped by both setbacks and successes. Physically, the long-term recovery period is about healing the systems taxed by prolonged stimulant use. The cardiovascular system, often strained by months or years of elevated blood pressure and irregular heart rhythms, may require monitoring and medical support. The immune system, weakened in heavy users, gradually regains strength as the body is no longer under constant chemical stress. The nervous system, too, begins the slow task of restoring balance, though in some cases, damage to certain neural pathways may be lasting. For those who use the drug intranasally, nasal tissues may regenerate over time if the damage was not too severe, though scarring can leave some permanent loss of function. Dental health can be restored through treatment, though the costs can be high. Lung function in former crack smokers can improve with cessation, though scarring from chronic irritation may persist. In each case, the body has a remarkable capacity to repair, provided the cycle of use is broken for good. Psychologically, recovery demands a redefinition of pleasure and reward. Activities that once felt ordinary, a walk in the sun, a conversation with a friend, finishing a project, must be rediscovered as sources of satisfaction. At first, these moments may feel muted compared to the rush of cocaine. But over time, as dopamine regulation stabilizes, they regain their depth and warmth. This gradual return of natural pleasure is one of the most hopeful signs of genuine healing. The social dimension of recovery cannot be overstated. Addiction often thrives in certain environments: nightclubs, party circles, high-pressure work settings. And part of staying clean involves reshaping one's surroundings. This might mean cutting ties with people who still use, avoiding places associated with past use, or finding new spaces where the focus is on connection rather than intoxication. Such changes can be emotionally painful, especially if it means leaving behind long-standing friendships or familiar routines. But they are often necessary to protect progress. Some choose to channel their recovery into advocacy or mentorship, turning their personal experience into a resource for others. By speaking openly about the realities of cocaine use, the fleeting highs, the lingering lows, the costs that ripple outward through relationships and health, they help dismantle the myths that can make the drug seem less dangerous than it is. As the months pass, milestones emerge: 30 days without use, 6 months, a year. Each marker represents not only the absence of a substance, but the presence of deliberate choices made over and over again. The temptation may never vanish entirely, but with each decision to stay on course, the hold of the drug loosens a little more. Yet, the shadow of cocaine remains visible in broader society. The global market for the drug continues to thrive, fueled by demand across every socioeconomic tier and every continent. Cartels, traffickers, and dealers adapt constantly to enforcement efforts, finding new routes, new concealment methods, and new ways to market their product. As long as there is demand, supply will find its way. And so the battle against cocaine is fought not only in courtrooms and customs checkpoints, but also in classrooms, clinics, and living rooms. The human cost, measured in health crises, broken families, and lost potential, is staggering. But so too is the resilience of those who reclaim their lives. Each recovery story is a counterpoint to the statistics, a reminder that while the drug is powerful, the human capacity for change is greater still. This brings us to the broader picture. The forces that keep cocaine in circulation, the mechanics of its global trade, and the evolving challenges in curbing its spread. That final chapter of this exploration is where we look at not just the individual journey, but the worldwide stage on which this substance continues to play its part. To see cocaine only through the lens of individual use is to miss the vast machinery that keeps it moving across continents. Behind every gram that appears at a party or in a hidden street corner transaction lies a supply chain that stretches from the remote fields of South America to urban centers in nearly every country on Earth. It is an enterprise as structured and adaptive as any multinational corporation, and it thrives because its product, despite its dangers, continues to be sought out by millions. The journey begins with the coca plant itself, cultivated primarily in regions of Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. In these areas, the plant is both a livelihood and, for some, a cultural artifact with ancient roots. But once destined for illicit markets, the leaves are harvested and transported to hidden processing sites. There, the leaves are macerated, soaked in solvents, and combined with chemicals that strip out the active alkaloid. The process transforms raw vegetation into a paste, then into a pure crystalline form, cocaine hydrochloride, ready for shipment. Transporting this product from its origin to consumer markets requires ingenuity and constant adaptation. For decades, traffickers have used a shifting array of methods: concealed compartments in vehicles, hidden cargo in maritime containers, light aircraft flights over remote borders, and even semi-submersible vessels designed to evade radar. Each interception by authorities prompts new tactics, ensuring that the flow never entirely stops. Once it reaches distribution hubs, cocaine is often cut, diluted with other powders to increase volume and profit margins. Here is where dangerous adulterants frequently enter the equation. While some are inert substances like talc or sugars, others are pharmacologically active, creating unpredictable effects. Levamisole, already discussed, is just one example. Stimulants, anesthetics, and other synthetic compounds are also used, each bringing its own health risks. In recent years, contamination with fentanyl, intentional or otherwise, has added a lethal layer to an already dangerous drug. From these hubs, cocaine moves into street-level networks. In wealthy neighborhoods, it might be marketed as a premium, pure product, commanding high prices. In less affluent areas, crack often dominates, its lower cost making it accessible but no less destructive. The segmentation of markets reflects not only economics, but also the way in which different forms of the drug have been culturally framed. Powder as a vice of the elite, crack as a scourge of the marginalized. These perceptions have influenced everything from law enforcement priorities to sentencing laws. and they remain a source of debate in discussions of criminal justice reform. On the enforcement side, the response to cocaine trafficking has spanned multiple approaches. International agencies coordinate interdiction efforts, sharing intelligence to track shipments and dismantle networks. National governments deploy specialized police units, border patrols, and military resources to target producers and traffickers. Yet, for every success story, a major seizure, a cartel leader captured, there are countless shipments that pass undetected. The resilience of the trade lies in its decentralization. Remove one link and others quickly adapt to fill the gap. Public health strategies have evolved alongside enforcement. In some countries, harm reduction initiatives aim to mitigate the damage caused by use rather than solely punish it. These can include needle exchange programs to reduce disease transmission, supervised consumption spaces to prevent overdose deaths, and education campaigns that present factual information without resorting to fear-based tactics. Critics argue that such measures normalize drug use, while proponents point to reductions in mortality and disease as proof of their value. The cultural narrative around cocaine has also shifted over time. In the 1970s and 1980s, portrayals in film and music often glamorized its use, associating it with power, success, and rebellious luxury. By the late 1980s, the rise of crack and the intense media coverage of its effects created a starkly different image, one of devastation, crime, and decay. Today, depictions vary widely, from cautionary tales in documentaries to casual references in entertainment, reflecting society's mixed and often contradictory attitudes toward the drug. Globalization has changed the cocaine economy in subtle but significant ways. Demand is no longer concentrated in North America and Europe. Emerging markets in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East are increasingly targeted by traffickers. New synthetic stimulants have appeared as competitors, but cocaine's long-standing reputation ensures it maintains a strong presence. At the same time, cultivation has expanded and shifted, with producers experimenting with strains of coca that yield more alkaloid per hectare, making eradication efforts more challenging. Environmental damage is another consequence rarely discussed in popular accounts. The chemicals used to process coca leaves can contaminate soil and waterways, affecting local agriculture and wildlife. Forests are cleared to make way for cultivation, contributing to deforestation in ecologically sensitive regions. In areas where armed groups control production, the environmental impact is compounded by conflict, displacement of communities, and the destruction of alternative livelihoods. On the demand side, prevention remains a complex challenge. Education programs that rely solely on scare tactics have shown limited success, as many young people dismiss exaggerated warnings once they encounter peers who use without immediate catastrophic consequences. More effective approaches integrate honest information about risks with broader life skills, teaching decision-making, stress management, and resilience. Programs that address underlying issues like poverty, trauma, and lack of opportunity can also reduce vulnerability to substance abuse in the first place. Treatment access is another critical factor. In regions where healthcare systems are underfunded, those struggling with cocaine addiction may have few resources beyond punitive legal measures. In better resourced areas, specialized rehab facilities, outpatient therapy, and community-based support groups can provide the framework for recovery. But stigma still deters many from seeking help. Addressing this stigma, both culturally and within healthcare systems, is essential for expanding access to treatment. Looking forward, the landscape of cocaine production and consumption is unlikely to remain static. Technological advances, from encrypted communication platforms to drone-based smuggling, will continue to shape trafficking methods. Legal and policy changes in one region can shift production patterns in another, as traffickers seek the path of least resistance. Public attitudes may evolve further as research into addiction deepens and as societies grapple with the broader question of whether the decades-long war on drugs has achieved its intended goals. In the end, cocaine's story is one of contrasts between the exhilaration it promises and the damage it delivers, between the cultural images that glamorize it and the lived reality of those harmed by it, between the global networks that profit from it and the individual lives it disrupts. Understanding it fully requires moving beyond caricatures and slogans, looking instead at the complex web of chemistry, history, economics, and human behavior that sustains its place in the world. For those who have encountered cocaine, whether directly or indirectly, the takeaways are both simple and profound. Its power lies not only in its pharmacology, but in the narratives that surround it, the myths that make it seem alluring, and the structures that make it available. Breaking its hold at both the personal and societal level involves dismantling those myths, interrupting those structures, and replacing them with healthier alternatives. The fight against cocaine is not a single battle, but a series of ongoing efforts in laboratories, in courtrooms, in communities, and within the hearts and minds of individuals choosing each day whether to use. While the drug's history stretches back millennia, its future is not fixed. Each informed choice, each intervention, each recovery story contributes to reshaping that future. And perhaps that is the clearest message to close on. Cocaine is not an unstoppable force. It is a human-made problem with human-made solutions. And while those solutions may be complex, they are not beyond reach. The path away from it is difficult, but it is also possible. A road walked every day by those who refuse to let a white powder dictate the course of their lives.